we can kick it off into our keynote panel. I'll invite the panelists up now. Thank you so much. You're on the spot. So much for being here on this panel. Audience, let us know if you need anyone to talk louder. We were given one microphone, so I was like, so yeah, super excited to pick you guys' brain on a bunch of different topics. I'll briefly introduce you and then you can introduce yourself. More depth. This is Adam Choe. He's managing partner at 100 Ventures. He actually just came in to talk with Atland yesterday, so long time no see. Super resourceful and always willing to talk, so we appreciate that. Higgins is the CEO of Better You, which is an Atland portfolio company, and their office is actually here in this building, so they got to come into work on a Saturday. And yeah, the Atland team rock climbs with the Better You team often, so that's always a little activity. And then Stephanie Rich, she is head of platform at Bread and Butter Ventures, and the fund in general gives Atland a lot of guidance, and Steph has been a mentor to a lot of Atland fund members and always been supportive and honestly just like a cheerleader to us. And then Elise, our wonderful director, she worked at multiple different startups, has experience in other VC firms and even an accelerator, but I'll invite you to more of that. So if you want to just talk about what you've been up to in your role, like any current hobbies or passions, and then also if you guys would like to say one podcast or book that you would suggest and or someone in the VC or startup community that you look up to.
Yeah, okay. Things that I'm up to in the spare time I'm on to 100 Ventures. I serve on a local nonprofit Children's Cancer Research Fund. So spend time trying to help think of creative ways to help their nonprofit be more sustainable, not to rely on donors all the time for their ability to continue.
Podcast or book that you recommend?
One book that I read early on in my research, helpful, especially if you want to be an investor, called Play Bigger. I can't remember the name of the author, so it's like written by 4 different authors, but you look at Play Bigger, you should find it. So one that I just thought about different ways to think about what makes something investable for me.
Doing my spare time. So I have a 3-month-old daughter named Tasha. She's very busy on my free time. When I have extra downtime, I like to do rock climbing, sometimes with the Atland crew, which is awesome, or chess. I try to play a lot more chess these days, but I'm not as good as I used to be. That's like. In terms of podcasts, I'd recommend, I'll give you 2. One of them, I feel obligated. We just launched a podcast this month. Available on Spotify and wherever podcasts are heard. And then the other one I recommend would be Predictable Revenue. So Predictable Revenue is a podcast that's run by Aaron Ross. And Aaron Ross was the first BDR at Salesforce back in the early 2000s. And he really was a pioneer in terms of how outbound sales happen. And what that podcast is about is he brings on early stage sales leaders at different companies, all the way to IPO companies, startups, and he asks them how they go to market. What are the things you're doing that are interesting? What are you trying that's new or unique? And for me, I get a lot of interesting ideas by learning from other people who are in the space. Kind of just like the quote we saw earlier, it's good to be next to people in the space facing the problems. That's how I learn about things. That's a good one I'd recommend.
Spend a lot of time with tech stars. I read a lot non-business books. I head up to my cabin. From a book perspective, I think the main thing which hopefully many of you have already read is Venture Deals by Brad. It's just like a good thing to revisit every so often. Good overview of the venture system, entrepreneur, both from a founder perspective and investor perspective. It has changed in this last year, but it's a good overview.
I'm gonna take the route of the question of like what I do outside of Atland. So I am an intern at Bread and Butter Ventures. That is my boss. And then I just wrapped up working with Techstars for a year and a half for their accelerator programs, as well as helping out with two of our portfolio companies. So Structural, who's actually used to be in this building, but recently got acquired by Agio Marketing, and then Availus, which is one of our newer in the past year portfolio companies. Aside from that, I love to read non-business books as well. Love to read like fantasy fiction, and dive into those worlds. And I'm actually gonna take the other route of the question of someone that I look up to, aside from my amazing boss, Stephanie, and the small team that got to work here in the Twin Cities. Someone I follow pretty closely is Nicole Bates-Masso. She's an investor at Harlem Capital. If you guys heard of her, definitely give her a follow on Twitter. Her big thing is like breaking down the barriers to entry kind of to the VC jobs for younger people, and she posts weekly VC job openings as well. It's really helpful for me as someone in a career or a senior pursuing a career in venture post-graduation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and Nicole's great. She comes in and speaks actually at a lot of dorm room funds accelerators. So if there's any students in here who are interested in founding a company or investing, they have a lot of programs, female investor track, female founder track. I don't know if they have any male founder track or male track, but for the women in the and to kind of dive into some more background, I think would be cool to start with your journey within VC or entrepreneurship. So for Adam, like what led you to becoming a managing partner at
Failed startup? No. I'm just kidding. Came out of school, went straight into the corporate world, decided it really wasn't for me. Went back to the University of Minnesota to do my master's in healthcare innovation. And through that journey, I realized that there was so much of the business world that I didn't understand, primarily upstream functions of how do you get an idea to the market. And so I had a chance to do 2 research fellowships at U, which turned into spinning a company out of the university, which led to a bootstrapping company for 5 years, while in parallel was managing director of an organization generator here locally. Through that journey, got to sit on both sides of founder life as well as advisor or startup coach life. The only reason it worked out was my startup was slightly ahead of the stage of many of the founders that were going through the accelerator. And so I got to learn trial by fire on my own and then take those learnings and try to provide that to the founders. Eventually decided that I couldn't do both and keep my sanity. So stepped down on the generator side to go full-time on the startup. And then 3 months into my full-time startup journey, COVID hit, which took the company that I was building, flipped it on its head and stopped it dead in its tracks. And so as a result of that, learned what it meant to be a startup founder that was just trying to, be scrappy and survive. Ultimately, the long and short of it was it ended up dying. The benefit was bootstrapping meant I didn't have any outstanding debts to any close friends or family or things like that. So I could close the company down without too much collateral damage outside of just like the time invested in the money personally. But what I realized was oftentimes you're told that you should raise money to scale your venture. In reality, had I raised money or pre-pandemic, I would have had enough money in my bank account to keep the company alive long enough to probably still be working on the startup instead of being in the VC role. So for me, the S word isn't scaling for pre-seed investment. It's more to survive long, where do you want to go? So I just saw the huge importance of getting capital into the hands of early risk takers, oftentimes ones that don't have the track record to get invested in. So first-time founders, young founders, founders of color, women founders, all these groups are overlooked and only, representative of less than single-digit percentage-wise, right? I don't know what the numbers are for young founders, but from the perspective of like women and people of color, it's less than 3%. And so as a result of that, decided like if my company had a chance to have capital, it probably would still do what I'm doing for my 9 to 5 day. And so how many other great ideas, I'm biased, I thought the idea was great. How many other great ideas are out there that don't even have a chance to get out to impact society? So that's kind of what it makes makes sense to take all the learnings and try to provide it as, not just capital, but also experience to early founders that might not have an opportunity from some point as they don't focus on similar to them.
I think it's a really good perspective for someone who worked out. And then Sean, what led you to start that?
Yeah, so Better You is the second company that I've founded. The first company was with two people who I went to school with, one in high school and one in college. And I had no intention of being a startup person, which is a weird thing, because I've been doing it for a few years now. I got my degree in accounting from the University of St. Thomas, down over on Savannah. And no Tommy's here, that's okay. So I literally set out to kind of just go work a job, do all these things, but I knew these people who were doing interesting things. Like my buddy Peter in high school, he was buying up these old Pokemon games and then modding the game files. You could catch all the Pokemon without having to trade, which if you're like 14 is a really big deal. Even now in my 30s, that's still a really big deal. But he would sell these on eBay. This was the early days of eBay. And I remember when I was 16, I was hanging out with Peter at his house, and he showed me his business. He was making $10,000 a semester, and I was working at Kmart for $7.25. And I thought to myself, maybe there's something more than this. Maybe this isn't where I'm meant to be. And so we came in and kind of created this first business. That business was called iList Videos or VidGrid. It was acquired by Paylocity several years back. And so really where Better You started for me was in the absence after that adventure. I kind of found myself as patient zero with a problem. I would get to the end of my week and I wouldn't have done things that were important to me, like calling my parents, which seems really simple. And I would tell myself this story, how busy I was, all these things and commitments that I signed up for doing. And then you'd look at the weekly screen time report. I don't know if you ever saw this, but mine would say YouTube 4 hours. What? These things are mutually exclusive. You can't both be too busy and then also have spent 4 hours on YouTube. And so it got me really interested in this idea of how do we spend our time? How much of our time are we using intentionally versus going down these rabbit holes, not even realizing it? And what I learned was that in 2018, when we launched the business, that our time was actually already optimized. It just wasn't being optimized for us. There were app makers and advertisers who cared more about what I wanted to watch than what I actually wanted. And for us, the idea of if I could just take these same tools that make it so easy to go for that next video or that next post, but apply it to making that next phone call to my parents, planning that next trip to my gym, suddenly we could turn this attention economy from a race to the bottom, who's getting more eyeballs and more minutes, and replace it with a race to the top of which products could be more helpful to me in my life. And that's really where we started and kind of where we are today.
That's awesome. How did you, when you first had the idea, did you have people in mind that you're like, okay, I think I want to start this business? Or how did the team form?
Yeah, so Evan Lundis was here earlier. He had to leave. He's playing a metal show across the street at the Amsterdam. I see him. I see him every day. He's also going to be. I know it's good for a decade. He's always working on different things. I tried to recruit him to come work with me at the first company. He always turned me down because that company wasn't really a mission-driven company. I think it's fair. I pitched him one time and he said, Sean, if you can explain to me why the world needs another video. The name of the company was VidGrid, help people make videos, right? That's what we did. And I gave him an answer, which was not convincing. And I remember when I shared the idea for Better You, he like kind of sarcastically told me, he's like, oh, you decided to work on a problem that matters. Like, way to go. Great. Like, but anyway, so I knew he was someone I wanted to try to bring on if we could do it. And then we met Tommy. So Dr. Tommy Koo, he was a PhD in applied mathematics from Dartmouth College. We actually met him at Twin Cities Startup Week. He would come in through the fly-in program. Shout out to Beta, MN, and Dalton for organizing the fly-in program, a chance for out-of-state people to see what our ecosystem's all about. And we met him, and when I found out what he did, I basically was like, I need to meet this person. I need to find him. We need to have coffee. We need to meet. We need to not let him go back to Boston. And we did all these things, and he joined the team and moved after two weeks later. And it was us, it was the three of us who kind of started this thing 5 years ago.
And Steph, I'd love to hear kind of what led you then to.
So when I was in college and was like 21. I had no idea what venture capital was, or startups or anything. I was actually a journalism major and focused in magazine editing and spent a lot of my time doing concert production. So I used to bring all of the acts to Northwestern to perform. And so I thought, okay, I love doing the production side of arts. I'm gonna move to LA and get to be in the film industry. So that's a fun fact that not that many people know about me. So I was in the film industry for about 5 years. Eventually became director of sales and marketing at a production company. I sold the rights to movies as a way to finance them, which was super fun. I'll tell you all about it. It was a great job in your early 20s. It was something I realized I did not have the love for to stay for the rest of my life. Realized I had no idea what real people did in the rest of the world from a business perspective, and so went back to business school at Cambridge. Went from LA to England, back to Minnesota, thanks to a lovely gentleman. That is the honest truth. Been married for 9 years, so it worked out. It's a good decision. But I moved back to Minnesota and wasn't totally sure what I was going to do. And I met this guy who was starting a company, was going to launch on Kickstarter, needed some help. And this was back in the days of Coca, which is an entrepreneurial co-working space over in Minneapolis. And he said, why don't you come help me? And that is how I became employee number 1 at what turned out to be a fairly high growth venture-backed startup called Particle, originally called Spark. So there for about 4 years, really cool opportunity because it was an incredibly technical team. And so I got to stand up a lot of business functions, HR, CS, finance, and then really focused in on marketing. Left when we were at about a $6 million run rate. Had a couple of my own things, but got quite into mentoring and working with early stage startups at Techstars. How I first met Sean, I think, when he was EIR at the retail program. And so I got to know Brett Grohl, who you may know, who is one of the managing partners of Bread and Butter, and eventually became his entrepreneur in residence at Techstars Farm to Fork, which is a food tech accelerator. There I learned a ton about sourcing companies, working with teams. I was hands-on with all 10 teams coming through the program and did a lot of pitch practice. As much as I would love to say this was a really, thoughtful effort for me to go into VC, happened at the Choe over there. Famous lunch between Brett and I, where I had a small publication for a hot minute, and I decided that was not what I wanted to do. So I said, I'm going to shut it down. What should I do next? And he said, why don't you come work with me? And I said, okay. And that is what happened to, honestly, for me to start working at Bread and Butter Ventures. And just say that as an example of like right place, right time, but I had put in, years and years of work before that and had proven to Brett as entrepreneur in residence that I was ready for that. So we were talking out in the hall about like, there's a combination of luck, being at the right place, right time, and like setting yourself up for that success and making use of that opportunity. And so I've been working with Brett since December 2019 on the fund. We rebranded and Mary Grove came in 2020, and I run platform Brett, which we'll talk about later. But that was my journey.
Super cool. And I think that's something we've talked about within Atland is luck surface area. So the more experiences you throw yourself into, the more the surface area of your luck is going to grow, which again helps you find these opportunities that you might not have thought you wanted to do. So when you were first within film or even journalism at the beginning or the start point, did you think that was?
No, I thought I was going to run a small production. That's what I was focused on doing.
And then Elise, you obviously have a ton of different experiences and like your journey within.
Yeah, so I guess my VC story starts right after the summer going into my sophomore year. But before that, I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. So I took a lot of the business elective classes in high school and was part of BPA, Business Professionals of America, where I worked on business pitches and went to the national competition 1 year. So it was something like growing up, my dad's an entrepreneur. So he started his own consulting firm, and he actually works with people trying to put products out on the market in the med tech industry. So kind of hearing definitely different, from what kind of companies we look at in Atland, but growing up hearing those stories of him like meeting with founders, getting them to pass those regulations and like their dreams that they were, spending their lives building to help people, specifically in the healthcare space, was really inspired to me. And so I actually pledged a business fraternity the spring of my freshman year and got to meet a bunch of really cool people, 4 of them who were in Atland at the time, and heard all about it. I had no idea what venture capital was at all. And I was like, well, I'm interested in startups, like I'll apply. I knew it was really competitive, so I didn't have too high of hopes, but really enjoyed the application process of sourcing companies, diving into companies, and kind of giving recommendations also on what I thought that startups could do better. And so, by a miracle, I got into Atland my first semester of sophomore year, with an awesome cohort, a lot of them who are here today. And that first semester definitely was trying to figure out what the heck was going on, what VC was, and was really embraced by an awesome community of super intelligent people. And so through that, in the winter of my sophomore year, I got connected to Steph at Bread and Butter.
Yeah.
And we had a couple, yes, thanks, John, a couple meetings and decided that I would join their team as a marketing intern. That has now shifted to more of an investment intern. So I helped them with all their diligence memos, various research projects, kind of anything that Mary, Brett, or Steph need me to do. And through that, like we were talking about, like right place, right time, but also working with Brett, I was offered the job to be an operations associate at the Minnesota TechStars Accelerator Program. So that's the farm to fork one that Steph mentioned, which is food and agriculture technology in partnership with Ecolab, and then as well as their sports technology and media program in partnership with Minnesota. So I just wrapped up my 3 programs with them there, and that's been an incredible experience. I've learned so much from various speakers, and just the activities that we do there, and really getting to work alongside some awesome founders, and the internal team at TechStars and Bread and Butter. So, and then, yes, I guess through that kind of mixed in, I help out with 2 of our portfolio companies as well. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me. I'm like, did I just say that?
Fancy. Yeah, it's always super cool to hear how all your opportunities are kind of like catapulting into
Yeah.
one another.
I believe that was definitely like being a yes man, like saying yes to everything. I remember the day that it was actually at Bread and Butter's annual summit that Brett approached me 2 weeks before the Farm to Fork program started. It was like, hey, do you want to do this? Like, I think it's like 20 hours a week. And I was like, had a lot on my plate at the time. I was doing some part-time jobs with my summer internship. And I was like, sure. And then it was like 5 hours a week. It was definitely like such a good thing that I said yes to. Like, I knew how great an opportunity it was. And that like totally changed the gear of like my career and where I want to go now. So
I remember that moment.
yeah, you were there.
But yeah, thank you so much for a little bit of background. Just curious now to switch gears into maybe what skill you've seen is most transferable between all of those. That was kind of like a tough question. Doesn't have to just be one, maybe things you just find you're often using through like volunteer work and as a management partner or through many different jobs.
I mean, I think curiosity and the ability to learn is what has kind of gone throughout my career. You know, I can talk about this in a variety of different my jobs and Bread and Butter, but really what has kind of been the commonality is that I've been interested in what I'm doing. And so I've done a lot of networking, a lot of research, a lot of learning, a lot of Google, like love Google, about how to do stuff, which I think has served me well and has allowed me to be in like vastly different industries. I mean, my startup was Internet of Things, totally different from food tech, digital health, which is what we do now. Totally different, totally different from anything that I do. But it allows me to bring a fresh point of view, but it's all about like my desire to learn.
Yeah, I can go off that too. I think the ability to adapt also, like, especially with small teams, and like sometimes it feels like I'm at a startup when it's like such a small team where you're really wearing a lot of different hats and being asked to like, you're not doing the same thing every day. It's a bunch of different things. So definitely like being able to be quick on your feet, and also just like saying yes and then working on it 110%. Yeah, that's what I was.
I think for me, the one thing that I tried to bring from the first company to this company, one of the mistakes we made with the first company is we thought we knew best, right, from a product perspective. And certainly you need to have a vision of what you want to build, what it should do. But it matters, it's not what makes sense on the whiteboard, it's what makes sense to the customer. And I didn't realize early on enough that it was my job to figure out what made sense to the customer. Right now, what just made sense to me on the whiteboard. And so I think being willing to try new things and iterate and experiment, and it's okay to be wrong, right? Like that's the biggest thing for me. It's Sean, whatever, trying it at the first business was afraid to be wrong. Just in reality, he was afraid to have it wrong. And that's why maybe he didn't talk to as many people as he should have. He didn't get the feedback in his depth as it would have helped. And I think on those sides, like just doing that work, making sure, because that's what enables us to be successful is when we learn and iterate. So I think that vulnerability, I would say, is a big piece for me.
Yeah, I love everything that's already been said, so I think the only thing that I would add is something that's come with me throughout this whole process, and it's gotten better over time. I was bad at it at the beginning, it's just investing in people, so investing in the relationship. So when I first started, I felt as though I needed to hit the ground running as fast as I could, whether it's through connections or asking people for X, Y, or Z, hoping for some form of a transactional value that both sides benefit from. But what I realized over time is that most of that will only really come to fruition. You can build trust and build empathy, build like a bond with the people that you're trying to connect with. So as the years have gone on, it's been more fruitful from the early relationships that I've built. And so I think I realized that building relationships meaningfully is the thing that I've taken with me through the journey. Even people that I met during my time at Generator or during my time at Yonder, I'm not doing those things now, but those relationships probably the thing that's the most impactful, which is understanding that you can't do it alone. It's hard. And if you don't build strong relationships with your team, your investors, your advisors, your mentors, it's not gonna work out. I mean, you might get lucky and it might work out, but chances are at some point that'll work itself. Universally, just focusing most of my attention and most of my time on building good relationships. I don't know where I spend most of the time. It sucks because when you're raising a fund, you have a finite amount of time to translate that into something, but it also means that like it might suck now, but 5 years from now, I'll probably not focusing on asking for something, but focusing on being there for something.
Not even just in all super good points. And I know that this was kind of covered in what you guys were talking about with your background, but I just want to kind of ask what initially sparked your interest in venture entrepreneurship. Sean, I know you said seeing your buddy like making 10K a semester, that's crazy. I don't know if that's like what sparked it, but yeah, I just want to.
I would tweak it maybe slightly. I think for me, it'd be the people, right? So like the fact that I knew this person in high school who was really solid, had the dedication, was doing something by himself. And then I had this person in college in my accounting classes who was taking it seriously. And I was kind of that person in school who always took things like seriously and was working really hard. And the fact that they were game to do, I think was the big thing for me. Where I wouldn't have tried it if it had just been me kind of thing. But when we had other people, and what I've come to appreciate over time is through a startup, you get to work with some of the smartest people you might ever meet. And I think if you believe that you're the combination of the 5 people that you spend the most time around, you're going to be leveling up in massive ways in a very short amount of time. And I didn't really appreciate it then. But definitely the people that you get to build with, for me, was the thing that got me out of the debits and credits and into starting.
I'd say when I got really excited with the protocol, which we started called Spark, was one of the first Wi-Fi connected devices to market. Whole other story, but we actually started as a connected light bulb. So I'm really familiar with tech problems, a lot of tech problems, had a lot of them in my life. And so we set up a Kickstarter campaign for this connected light bulb. It seems not very innovative. In 2012 it was. And set it up so that if you tweeted us, it would light up a light bulb in Minnesota from anywhere in the world. And so I still remember Wired tweeting about Spark at the time. And it was just this crazy thing because we started working on campaign and the product and everything in like August, and this was end of October. And so I think that just the speed of the startup and that we could do something that was like national and crazy and innovative in that quick of a time, and there were 3 of us, was crazy. And super, super fun. And so I think I fell in love with the speed and how much like a small team could have such a big impact.
So I think like my interest in entrepreneurship, I talked about a bit before about my dad and the founders that he works with in his job and hearing their stories. But I think where I really got excited about venture was the first like company that I came across that first semester that I was just super excited about. And that was called Ren.co. It was a climate tech startup. They're still going strong today. But they, the team and them had a really inspiring story and mission, that they have basically an investment portfolio that consumers can invest in for projects that are offsetting like, carbon emissions around the globe. So like, just a variety of different projects. And so I remember seeing that in class and just getting like super excited about it. Like I couldn't stop thinking about it. And Harrison and I actually had a meeting with the founder. They weren't even raising, and we're just excited to meet people that were as excited about it. And I think that was the first time that I like had a meeting with a founder that was really inspiring to me to see like their vision and their journey and how they're going to change the world. And so that I think is when it really fit into me, like this crazy opportunity that I have in a student-run VC fund where I get to meet people like this and could potentially make a difference in their journey.
So for me, every day that goes by, serendipity is more and more important. My dad started his journey here in America as a entrepreneur doing speaking in which he got a 2-year degree in HVAC, took his family to New York, and he built a small business. Spent 5 years working 7 days a week, stacking up cash to bring the family back to Minnesota. With his whole intent of like make enough money to build a house and buy a car and not be living paycheck to paycheck. And so that was his goal. And so I didn't know it at the time. 25 years passed. And I finally realized, oh, that's what entrepreneurship is, right? You hear about all the stories about Texas trillion-dollar opportunities, but for a vast majority of people in the country, small businesses will entrepreneurship. So for me, I thought to myself, wow, his hard work let our family jump maybe 1-2 generations of foundation building. So he gave us the ability to go to college, to go and get a white collar job, 9 to 5, live a more easy life, right? Like I've spent many summers doing landscaping, holding a weed whip and blower, and it's not for me, right? I don't want to work a blue collar job where I'm sweating in the sun for. So I realized very quickly that's not what my DNA was. I'm more of a behind the laptop, sipping coffees at Caribou and having. Don't get me wrong, I love to break the sweat and go work out, but not for my living. So I realized very quickly that I wasn't. I also realized that serendipitously that like I was told my whole life that I would become a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, you know, person growing up, and that's just kind of like how the immigrant story is. You're told that's what you're going to do. But I quickly realized that like, and I'm completely ripping this off from another time. I think Brandon. He told me that people simply just want to be remembered, but we're all going to be remembered things that. So, end of the day, there's 2 things that we want in society, and mainstream media doesn't let us do it, which is like they'll just want to fit in, they'll just want to be remembered. And so I thought to myself, what's the best way to be remembered? Is it to go work a 9 to 5 at a corporation where you know I make a 401k, I have benefits and whatnot? Yeah, that's one way because my family's going to remember me. Or do I take a big swing and try to become a founder that solves a big problem? The problem that I try to solve is pediatric anxiety. I still think there's a world where our idea comes to fruition probably not by us, probably some other company 20 years from now, or 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now, that says, we came up with this great idea. If you look at history, most ideas that succeed, someone tried 10 years, 15 years, and failed, and then it gets re-brought up. Like, you look at fashion, same thing, right? Like, things that we probably wore in the 90s, it's coming back into style today, right? And so everything's cyclical, everything's a ripoff of something else that came through something else, right? And so I thought the best way for me to be remembered is to try to either build a company or invest in a company that solves a really, really hard problem. Whether it's climate, whether it's healthcare, whether it's about financial literacy, who knows what it is, but the best chance of leaving a lasting legacy is to invest in as many cool, impactful, high potential companies that I can, and hopefully some of those founders become the next Bezos, the next Elon, the next whatever. Hopefully seen in a better light than some. You can see. I mean, that's the classic story, right? One just live long enough to become a villain. I hope it's good. At the end of the day, big enough, someone's gonna eat. That's just how. You can be the most well-intentioned person, but if you get big enough, it's gonna be. So my goal is to invest in some of those. I made an impact. Better you become the company that's so big that now they say you're not actually making an impact. You know, and be honest, why we're all up here, and I think everyone in this room is here because you have aspirations in something very, very meaningful and change the world in some way that.
Investors, what are the key qualities that you look for in potential portfolio companies or potential investors? I think that's always important, even especially like as founders, they're not often we don't look at that as, oh, which investors do they actually want to work with, because to some people they just are looking for money. So love to hear your thoughts.
I can go first. I think like for Atland specifically, a really big thing that I look at before diving in deeper into a company is the thesis fit. I think that's like super important for me personally just to follow, because if it doesn't align with our thesis, then it doesn't even make it the next step. But something that working at Bread and Butter and Techstars is really ingrained in my brain, specifically for early stage companies, is team, product, market, traction. That's a saying that gets thrown around a lot. So obviously team, especially for early stage, is like the biggest thing that I look at. And so that can come from just their previous experiences and then those meetings that you're actually having with the team. So we've had companies that we really liked the idea and the market opportunity, but it just wasn't the right fit with the founder. And so that is something that, especially at this stage, you really are taking a bet on the founder. And so I would say that's for sure the number one thing that holds important.
Just a follow-up question to that. What is the big importance of the team being the main framework to look at?
So like, why is the team important? Because like, especially at early stage, like the company could change in so many ways, like in the next week, month, year. And so you really are betting on that team of people to be the ones to bring whatever it is that they end up doing with the company, because it will change a lot from especially pre-seed to just getting into those bigger stages. And so really seeing that team chemistry and their previous experiences, their vision for the company, how in it are they, yeah, it's really important. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. I would 100% agree with everything Elise just said, and just to expand a little bit on team. You know, a few other things we're looking for. She alluded to it, but founder market fit. So why is this founder or this group of founders? Why are they the people that can solve this problem? And it might be industry experience, it might be personal experience, it might be you know, they're former HubSpot AI leaders and they're have a new AI company. And some sort of like founder market fit is really important. Love to see balanced teams. And so what I mean by that is like, you know, you might have somebody who's super strong in business and someone who's super strong in technology and someone who's super strong in another area. Love to see balanced teams. And then, you know, it's people you want to work with too, frankly, of like, you work with these people for a long time. Brett loves to say that the average VC relationship is longer than the average marriage in the US. It's true, it's like 7 to 10 years. I mean, I think about like my company that I was talking about, Particle, it is still going. It has been 10 years since we got our first VC check. And so it's people that you want to work with. And so if they're frankly an asshole, like, no, I don't want to work with you, A. I don't think you're going to want to have, like, anyone's going to want to work for you. And I don't think anyone's going to want to partner with you. And so that's like a little thing, but I think it's really important.
From the company perspective, I think, you know, and Adam hinted at it earlier, right, with the people side, so I just brought it back. For me, the extra step that I try to look for is after I have a meeting with somebody, with this investor, do I want to meet with them again? If money wasn't the thing, right? What I want to do, I want to meet with them again. And the answer needs to be yes, right? Because there's other things. They've got a depth of knowledge in my industry, or they've seen a lot of other companies at my stage and they know something about this go-to-market, right? Whatever it might be, or maybe they feel the problem that I'm experiencing. So they want to give us detailed feedback on the product and things like that. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can add value, but it's kind of just that gut check at the end of the meeting is, what do I want to do this person again? And if it's no, then I'm in the wrong place. The other thing I would say that I do with the investors that we work with at Better You, and I learned it the first go around, but I always contact other companies that they've invested in. And everyone will offer companies up. I actually don't use those companies that they offer up. I try to like find my own companies. Maybe that's better or not, but I'm really looking for a company that hasn't rocket shipped away, right? I want someone that's doing some small things. Maybe they've kind of gone flat. Maybe they've had some downs, some tough times they're dealing with. Because I want to know how does this investor react in that situation? When the chips are on the table and someone's all in, is this person with them, or are they off playing another game, right? And I want someone who's going to be willing to roll up their sleeves and help me if I'm in a situation where I need help. So just hearing how people behave and react in those situations, I think tells me a lot about a person that could potentially be. That's kind of my approach. But again, it's all people focused.
Yeah, they pretty much said all the bullet points that are important.
We're gonna tee you up first next time.
Yeah. Want to back people. And bring them up in a conversation and, you know, truthfully feel a certain way about them. It's hard to go to bat for them when things are tough, or, you know, support them in a way where, yeah, if they're not people that you find enjoyable, then it's not going to be something that you stay up an extra hour to send an email or go out of your way to try to network. You know, team is super important. I think from like a technical perspective, it's not even technical, you know, from the art side for me. If that call confuses me utterly, or I have a lot of devil's advocate questions, it inherently means that I should probably be more concerned on that opportunity, because it's probably like I always say, like, when I worked at Generator, I'm sure you guys did it at Techstars and other places, where if you have a team of people analyzing a deal and you score everything, right? If I ever found one where I scored it really high and someone scored it with 0 or vice versa, to me, that was like an auto flag of like, we need to look further into this deal, because if it's that polarizing, there's probably something there worth exploring. So, you know, that innate ability to not discredit something because it sounds so far-fetched, it's like, it goes against everything that's human nature, but it's very important when you're trying to find, you know, huge outsized returns in the industry. So if everyone in the room unanimously feels a certain way about it, it probably means you should give it a second. So for a team like Atland's 25 people strong, if you're all like, yeah, this all sucks, or yeah, it's the greatest thing ever, probably a good signal that it's worth reevaluating.
For the importance too of like points to diversity of perspective. So like Alva mentioned, within Atland, we have like 5 different colleges represented. So there can be those polarizing opinions. And we'll kick it off with you this time. For the people on or like in a fund curious to know your personal investment thesis and kind of how within the general fund strategy you look at.
Yes, Tundra at large, earliest stage, so 80% of our deals are pre-seed. So we're happy and comfortable investing in companies that are pre-product, pre-revenue. We're optimizing for finding really smart, talented, enjoyable people to work with, and then figuring out the messy details along the way. We focus on tech, consumer, and health. There's nuance in all those verticals, but broadly speaking, those are the play. Primarily because we feel like it's one of the strengths of the West and being so large. In terms of my personal thesis, I'm looking for companies that I think are solving hard problems that are necessary. Like, do I care about the next TikTok or the next Twitter or the next whatever? I mean, not really. Will I try to still help that Twitter get connected with the right investors? Absolutely. But give me the company that's trying to solve the issues that we have for the senior citizen population. Give me the companies that are trying to solve the issue of the cost of drugs and like things like that. I'm primarily focused on, but I'm also interested in ways, how do we create better situations from like an education sector? We talk a lot about like solving issues, but a lot of the issues in society are based on things that take decades to solve, not just, pouring money into it right now. You think about like health disparities and all these other things. A lot of it has to do with like, how do we get kids to have better financial education, where they understand that like, maybe I shouldn't spend $20 on that instead invest into a long-term savings account, right? And so these are things that are systemic issues that need a lot of work. So finding issues that I don't think can be solved overnight, but finding the right teams that have figured out ways to make jump the shark of it in terms of, if we did it the traditional way, it would probably take 20 years. We think we have the right skills, make that happen in 5. Those are the ones I think are the big billion dollars within grassroots.
So our thesis is we invest in seed stage companies, sometimes pre-seed. It's very kind of fuzzy line right now between pre-seed and seed. So we invest in seed stage companies in digital health, enterprise SaaS, and food tech, and those areas map back to things that are strong in Minnesota. So we invest all over the country and then lean into resources here for everything from due diligence to commercial partnerships and more. I'll talk a little bit about the sourcing aspect of it, because I think the key thing for us that we've been able to leverage is network. And I mean that from a few different points of view of like, one, it's the warm intros from co-investors. So Brett and Mary have a long history in the startup ecosystem. And so we know quite a few co-investors across the country. So we get a lot of deals from folks who either invested in their pre-seed or investing in their seed, met them and they're too early for them. So a lot of that way, people within our network just broadly is great. Of like, if John sends a company, we're going to look at it. And so we get a lot that way. Hopefully, because with these network people, we've proven that we're good investors and we're great founders. And so we also get deals from our founders. That's one of the best sources. Like, you better believe if the founder sends in a deal, we're going to take a serious look at it. We get a lot of cold inbounds, a lot. And so we do actually look at all of those. The easiest thing to do is look if they fit our thesis. That's an immediate and a lot of them don't. A lot of people do not do research, and so send us like a crypto startup. That's a really easy no. Or sometimes, like, if it's not addressed to us, then that they ignore. And so I think some of like the network building is how do we build our audience? How do we build our brand so that people have heard of us and so are sending us deals? Then it's relationships with accelerators and looking through lists and seeing who's in there. Elise right now is going through the generator lightning round list for the fall, figuring out, okay, who is it important out of these companies that bread and butter needs. I think that's huge. So it's taken years for us to build that network, and it pays dividends now. We saw like this year is insane. We can talk about where venture is right now, but we're seeing like significantly more deals than ever before. So we've seen like by end of June, we've seen like 1,800 deals or something like that. Just because everyone wants money right now. And so I think it's also then having things within our team of like, okay, do they fit our thesis? Where is the stage that we invest? where are the signals of the seeking product market traction that we might say yes and move forward with moving from. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I know we already heard a bit about Atland's pieces that were early stage, run VC fund investing in companies solving problems facing our generation, or Gen Z. And I think that this is something like we're also workshopping so we keep our thesis young for digitally native generations. As Gen Z grows older, we want to stay in that younger space, and meeting the needs of new markets that are entering.
I just have, can you explain the idea, please?
So thesis is just like the broad range or umbrella of companies that we'll look at to invest. So we have all the companies we look at just have to fit under that. So they just have to be companies that are solving problems facing our generation. So if it's a company targeting a market that's way out of our generation, a pretty quick no for us to be like, oh, this just wouldn't fit. It wouldn't be the right investment.
Every VC has a thesis that encompasses both what sectors you're investing in, and sometimes it's generalist, but also what stage. It might be where it's investing in underrepresented founders. It might be all sorts of things, but it's essentially the viewpoint of who you're investing in. Because you need a thesis to go, if I go and say, Sean, do you want to invest in bread and butter? I've got to have a view. What are we investing in? Am I investing in pre-IPO companies? Am I investing in pre-seed? And what is that?
And so for my personal thesis, how that fits in, I would say I'm generally drawn more to companies in the digital health, femtech, climate, sustainability industries, and look for diverse teams. So whether that's women founders or people of color, just some sort of diversity of perspective on the team is really important also to look at when evaluating teams. And I also really enjoy looking at earlier stage companies. So pre-seed is what I really love to look at, and really the more ideation stage, maybe pre-revenue, but really team focused vision.
Thank you. And we've talked a little bit about the value of overall network, and I think value is super important. So from the eyes of a VC or from the shoes of a founder, what do you think is the true value that VCs bring to startups when they invest?
I mean, I can speak to some, I remember with the first company, we had a lot of really great investors. My favorite investor is the guy who wrote us only a 50K check. That first company raised $3 million per contract. So 50K is not a lot of money compared to what we raised. But that individual investor at the first company connected us with customers. One of those customers was the University of Nebraska school system. That school system paid us $500K annually. So that 50K became $500K in revenue. And this person was making a lot of connections for us. So in terms of value, I think there's a few. Certainly there can be network, which can be customers, it can be candidates for recruiting. We want to find the best people. Sometimes VCs get resumes from other companies or other people who said, hey, I'm interested in tech. I want to learn about your companies. That's been a huge helpful piece for us. I think when you've got folks who have expertise in your industry, right, leaning on them for strategy, oftentimes as a founder, your head's down, you're looking, in the trees, they can see the forest a little bit better on occasion. And that can be really helpful too. In our industry, for example, in health, in the last 90 days, Limeade got bought by WebMD, Virgin Pulse got acquired for $3 billion, ShareCare got bought. There's a lot of things happening in our space in digital health right now. And so having people who are more macro, I can't spend any time thinking about those things. We're going to spend time thinking about the next feature or how do we bring on this next major hire. That's the operational side. So having someone who can really be high level, knows the industry, and let us know what's happening and give us interesting perspectives, really think that are valuable.
From perspective I sit at today, I think the value that I should bring to a founder is two-part. One is being a sounding board, therapist, strategist during our touch bases. Our cadence is once a month. There's a balance of asking for too much of a founder's time versus not enough. So what we ask is once a month for 30 minutes on a call. If it needs to go past it, it's great. If you need to follow up, that's also great. But if you don't actually put it on the calendar, it just ends up not happening. Founders are busy, so if it's not on their, to-do list, you're just gonna be ignored. Oftentimes we punt meetings a lot, but that's because they're busy doing something, but, then being available through Slack, text, to be the first call when something's going well, when it's not. You wanna have enough trust that they are willing to come to you to speak about it instead of somebody else, because knowledge is power, and if you hear about a situation that goes terribly after it's already done and settled, it's a terrible spot to be as an investor. So our job is to have enough trust built up where we're one of the first calls that are done in meetings. And that hopefully continues as long as they're in existence, even if they have bigger check. And then, so that's on the operating side of like the day-to-day interaction. And then obviously all the things that Sean talked about, right? If I don't have the right connection to be supported immediately for whatever need that they have, my goal is then try to find a connection that can be helpful. Sometimes that's me proactively looking for individuals as a good resource and building that relationship up. Or it just happens serendipitously where I meet somebody at a coffee meeting, just so happens that was an issue. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I have a portfolio that I want to introduce you to. Right? So it's very much like it's a never ending process. And even if the founder's not asking for it, oftentimes my goal is to say, oh, I met somebody. I'm going to see if John wants to talk to me. You never know where that's going to go. So yeah, it's just always being an extension, a Google Chrome extension of the founder from the perspective, but also from like that therapist, whatever role. So if you can't do one of those things well, or both of them, then yeah, I don't know if you're a really good path outside. Money is just basic.
So network is, I think, huge. I'd add, I don't know how to say that, institutional knowledge. So knowledge that you gain from investing in numerous companies. I mean, like, I'm just gonna use Brett for an example. Brett, when he was at Techstars as an MD, worked with, I think, 90 different companies. We have 68 investments at Bread and Butter. That's a lot of companies. That means we've seen a lot of, like, Brett, when he's a board member, he's been to numerous board meetings. He's seen numerous board decks. He knows now, because he's had that volume, what does a good board deck look like? What are the things we should be seeing from a company 1 year after they raised $3 million? What are the pitfalls of hiring? Like, working with scalable, or that scale of companies gives you that institutional knowledge and allows you to be, I think, a great sounding board if you're a good VC. It also saves resources. Like, that's my job from a platform perspective, is how do I support multiple companies at once? And so what resources can we build? Like a few actual examples, what am I actually talking about? Like, you have a framework for how to raise your Series A. So the moment that you close your seed, you start thinking about, like, okay, here's a little framework of where we're going to be when we do our Series A. You just say stuff, check in, and then when you're ready to raise, here's how you do that. Here's what affordable is. Here's what it should include. Here's what your deck should include. Here's a deck designer. Things like that, like resources that essentially help people skip steps, is how I look at it.
Yeah, I think another just example kind of what Bread and Butter also does for portfolio support is the platform like Small.
Yeah.
So founders can now like go in, portfolio founders, and see who they want to get a connection to, and then they can say who on the Bread and Butter team has a connection to them. Press a button and it'll send a forward poll to Stephanie, Brett, or Mary, who can then send that out. It's really just streamlining that process. Well, it's just another example of what portfolio support can look like. But answering the question in more of like an Atland focus, it's definitely different because we don't bring a lot of monetary value add, obviously, for companies right now. I'm deploying on a fund one that is just $25,000, 25K check. And so a lot of our value add, like our competitive edge, is that we're a student-run VC and we are so connected to our thesis problems facing our generation. So that means in general, we are usually the target market. So us having those university ties, access to doing market research, grassroots like marketing campaigns. I know a couple of us, a couple of people joined me last summer when I did that for one of our portfolio companies at the state fair. And also just being like a talent pipeline for interns too. And I know that we're also that for VCs and startups around the Twin Cities as well. But also along with that, not only just helping our portfolio companies with that, but also any founder that we come in contact with or that we work with, is something that I know a lot of teams are focusing on this semester. My team specifically, that was one of our goals. Also, because that just comes back to building the Atland brand. So we've gotten people intro to us who just want like product feedback, not even for an investment, but also we just passed on a company that we presented last week and we're meeting with them to do product feedback and still help them in any way that we can. And so I think those relationships are also going to be really important for Atland's future as well, and just establishing our spot in the market.
Yeah, for sure. And riffing off that idea of network, I want to talk a little bit about community. So that's the name of the game with platforms. So Steph, if you want to kick us off too with how are you building community within funds or even a company, or even just like the Twin Cities or startup ecosystem?
Yeah, I think from a platform standpoint and from a bread and butter standpoint, the most important thing for us is founders feel like they can call on each other. And so the Google group, a lot of VCs do this, Google group classes where founders can ask each other questions. What is Pulley like? Has anybody used it? Should we switch our capital over there? Getting that directly from founders, getting insight, creating relationships between people so that they have other founders working on is super important. You know, it's one of the reasons why we do a big summit biannually, just so that they can see each other and really lean on each other. I think from an ecosystem perspective, you know, I think community is unbelievably important just because I look back on starting a company in 2012 and there was very, very little in terms of startups. I mean, we didn't raise, maybe we raised like $15,000 here. All of our money came from the coast. And that was luck that we got connected out there, but there was nothing here. And so it made it harder to hire, it made it harder to customers, harder to do partnerships, harder to do deals. And now seeing the ecosystem, you know, 12 years later, or no, 11 years later, it's really incredible because you have opportunities to do those things, and because people know each other, because people can say, like, you know, I've seen this person's journey, I've gotten to know them, you should hire them, or getting to know people in the ecosystem who you eventually fund. I think it makes a huge difference. And to me, the best way to build community is to be open. You know, Elise just talked about giving product feedback for someone that passed on it. Meeting with people that are not necessarily going to add value to you immediately is super important. And I think giving back and being a resource to people, no matter what stage you're at, helps build that.
I love it. I think back to the first company, I remember we met with Ryan Broach with Matchstick Ventures. He turned us down, I think 2 or 3 times, but he'd always like do something. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, I'll see you later. It was like, oh, here, that's something we can do to help. Here's an intro, here's something. And then eventually he said he was going to invest. He invested in one of our rounds, or seed round, first company. And I almost like didn't believe it. I was like, really? Like, you've been saying no to us this whole time. I was like, what? It's like, well, we've seen you kind of grow and come together. And I just totally want to echo that point from Steph, right? The community's gotten to a much stronger spot than it was in 2012. You know, both from an investment network, and we've got early pre-seed funds. I don't think we had any pre-seed funds. Nothing, right? And kind of even more capital on that side, which is awesome. But also groups like Beta, which, you know, host big events and startup showcases, and there's a lot more programming. My first company, we were in the 3rd Beta showcase that they did, like the 3rd one. And there wasn't like a program behind it or all these things. And now it's like we get to meet these Beta founders, and we all have a lot of structure with programming and mentors and learn. And I think it's so cool just to see that, and also the colleges kind of participating, both from Atland, obviously, you know, I'm separate from you, but obviously affiliated there, and St. Thomas, other groups that are trying to fund local entrepreneurs building things. I think has been nice for sure. So yeah, I don't know how you continue to build that. I think just from my perspective, just keep going and like trying to bring people here from out of state. And anytime we get people, especially from the coast, who still have a little bit of a reputation as slept on, right? They're like, you live where? St. Paul. Like, what's that again? And so like trying to bring people here, like, hey, we've got an event, there's a conference, come on down. Like, so whether it's Startup Week or something else, encouraging people to see the ecosystem. So I do think once you get exposure to some of those events, you go, wow, okay, you know, like it's not Chicago and everybody else. Like, there's a lot of things happening in the markets in the West that we should know about.
Honestly, I think, the community here is great. I think one of the biggest pet peeves at large, the in-state rivalries that are still in existence. And I think until those can kind of be broken down and, so Minneapolis versus St. Paul or Twin Cities versus Greater Minnesota, I feel like at the end of the day, we're not even on the radar yet of any other markets, so why even, squabble between the borders? And so, like, there's been so much progress made. I joined the startup world in 2015, 2016. And back then it was leaps and bounds less than what it is today. I can only imagine what it was back in 2012, and I can only imagine how great it's gonna be in 2032 here, right? But, there's a lot of just, I think, it's a blessing and a curse to have so many corporations in town here. There's a lot of just like fat cat syndrome, where you can just go work a 9 to 5 and make great salary and great benefits, and you don't have to take risk. And but there's always a day where next year Amazon buys Target, Best Buy decides. Or some crazy things where like the pillars that are in our backyard aren't no longer the pillars. There used to be a day where Medtronic bought Scientific Medical, were all Minnesota-based med device companies. Now they're all based in Galway, Ireland, or based in Chicago. Like what's here today might not be here tomorrow, and so for me, it's about like how because the next bear market might be the difference between a nonprofit startup accelerator getting funding versus not. And the best thing we can do is continue to build this and a bigger offer that can just stand it. So I'm very thankful for where the community is today, but also there needs to be 15 other pre-seed funds that are rivaling us and pushing us to be better and stronger. Right now it's easy because there's only like us and a few other check writers at our stage, but I yearn for the day where there's 15 of us and I actually have to like put in even more effort to win over a founder, right? Because that means the ecosystem, we're not, great for what we have.
And what you said just reminded me of like a kind of like a traumatic experience. So when I went to join, I know I was like in a meeting with my career counselor at college, and I was like, I'm gonna do this startup thing. And they're like, I can get you an interview with her, and you're like, oh, we have these big companies. Sounds familiar. I was like, oh yeah, I got that.
Yeah, you don't get that recommendation.
No, start a company. Are you sure we can get you an interview at Target? I don't know. I don't think that's it.
Yeah, no, I think Minnesota's definitely underrated, but we gotta be less up. All right, so just quick time check. I'll wrap it up with one final question. And then if anyone has any questions for the panelists, you can find them during the networking hours now. So, if you guys just want to talk about maybe what you would have told your younger self, I know Elise is tell your younger self at the start of your career, and for Elise, maybe just like any general advice for the audience, for people who might want to bring into this.
I think it works actually. And just to kind of piggyback off the last question, like I think we're super lucky, like those of us entering the space now, just how tight knit the ecosystem is in the Twin Cities. Like that's what 2 years ago when I started to learn more about VC and entrepreneurship in the Twin Cities is what I was introduced to. And so I think that's also something that people from out of town are really surprised when they get here. Like working with founders from all across the world who travel here to be in Techstars for 3 months. They're always like, wow, like I never thought like a community this strong would be in Minnesota. So I think really utilizing that, and especially breaking into VC, I think it's so important to go to these events that are happening. Like I've been to a lot of events like demo days, beta showcases, office opening parties for Better You here, but really just supporting the people in the ecosystem. And actually the Better You office party that was after about a year of me kind of being in the space was the first time that I was at an event where I recognized enough people or had enough in common with people where like I didn't feel intimidated to be at an event. So I think that like intimidation and maybe imposter syndrome also will go away like the more you get yourself in the space and just put yourself out there, like everyone's looking to meet people and everyone's excited about what they're building. So I would also say that would be my big advice. But also as like students looking to break into VC. I know Adam talked about this when he came to talk to us yesterday, but really like taking advantage of being a student to get those calls or meetings with people in the space. That's something that I'm currently doing, just to try to get to meet more people, more industry professionals outside of the Twin Cities, and that has been super helpful for me. Yeah.
I would say, one, you're at the beginning, what I say to myself when I was. I think when I was that age, I was like, oh my God, every decision I make right now is my entire career, my entire life. But if I don't make the right decision now, where am I gonna be when I'm 50? I mean, obviously, as you've heard my story, like the decisions I made when I was 21 to work for a film company, like that didn't mean I was on a certain track. That didn't impact my ability to have great jobs. That didn't impact my ability to have a great life. That didn't, like, yeah, it made an impact in the sense of like what I learned and how I succeeded, but it didn't mean that what I decided at 21, you know, was gonna make or break me forever. It's not, right? Like this is the beginning. So I would say that. Then I'd also, I mean, some of that would also be like pressure. Like, again, I think I would have put less pressure on myself. Thanks of like having to be the best when you're in your early 20s. I think there's a lot of pressure on your friends. There's even more pressure these days for sports 30 under 30 and these lists and things like that. Just not worrying about that because like I will tell you right now, like, at my age, nobody remembers who was on that list. Nobody remembers what I was doing when I was 25. Like, it matters what I'm doing now, and so I would take that pressure off myself a lot.
I love it. I think what I would tell younger Sean is to get going sooner. I had a lot of reservations, even about sharing the ideas at the early days. Oh, is someone going to take my idea? Or maybe I know best. I don't want to show it to other people. It might be wrong. And the thing I learned, it's like the enemy isn't a random competitor that's going to sprout up on you magically. The enemy is the hour hand on the clock. And the hour hand on the clock is moving whether you are or not. And so for me, I would have just liked to, if I could do it over again, I would have liked to do a lot of those things faster. So if you have an idea, get started, get feedback on it, give it a shot. That's how it would go.
I'll do the counter. I'll say that I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had all of the different stuff. Research fellow, entrepreneur, managing director, corporate guy, all those things formulated my ability to kind of have a really stable foundation of experiences so I can understand the issues from different points of view. And so, you know, while it's fun to think that I can go straight into VC, an analyst, and then go up to partner track or whatever, you're going to lose an ability to have an empathy or an insight that's going to help you differentiate with the founder. I know for a fact that Sean can tell very quickly if someone came straight from business school and became an investor versus someone that has actually, you know, had a few bruises and scars along the way and how they're communicating with the founder. And it's quite honestly probably one of the biggest skills and assets that some of his investors provide him. And so like, I think that while I would have loved to be where I am today 10 years sooner, I don't think I'd be in a position to be potentially, I haven't done anything yet, right, in grand scheme of things, set myself up to have a chance of succeeding in this game of VC, because there's a lot of professions where you can just post for 40 years and get to the finish line. VC is a performance-based business. Think of yourself as a high-performing athlete. If you don't train, if you don't like put in the effort, you're not going to get to do this for a long time, right? Like for people like us, even as a founder, you're an athlete, right? It's just in business, right? You need to be better than the other athletes that are out there. And I don't mean it to like scare you, but like think of it. The more you train, the more you prepare, the better you'll do. And so like, you know, I think all the things that come into your journey help you get to that get to wherever you want to be, but you don't have to, like, I agree, I do wish I did more. Like, I will say, the one thing I wish I did more is like, put myself out there, be more creative, be more curious. When I was in my twenties, instead of like saying like, oh, can't wait till Saturday so I can go to the bars, right? Like, I wish I could take some of those days back and do more creative things and be more, but I don't regret any of the stops from the profession.
That was all incredibly insightful. I know audience probably learned a ton. I definitely did. So thank you guys again so much with the panel. Guys, thank you all for tuning in and enjoy lunch.